Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Content Marketing Academy podcast. Today, we've got two amazing guests, two professionals, two content marketing practitioners. We've got Pete Matthew and Julie Christie. Say hi, guys. Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
We're going to give you guys a couple of minutes each, actually, to give us an introduction. So instead of me talking all the time, I want to give you guys the opportunity to tell people a little bit about yourself. Today is this call is really all about podcasting. We want to really dig into I don't want to really talk about the basics of podcasting. I want to talk about how it impacts the business, how it works with content marketing, how it's benefited your businesses. So I kind of want to get you guys to give us an insight into all of that and really go a bit deeper and a bit wider on the sort of, the podcast, instead of talking about the basics, but really look at how this actually impacts business and how it's impacted your businesses specifically. Like I said, if anyone's got any questions, please use the command /Q in the comments section, and that'll flag up a question, and we'll bring your questions into the show as well. So it's very much a live show. If anyone's feeling confident enough, they can join the fourth seat. If you've got a podcast, that would be great. If you want to ask your question that you've penned, then jump in and ask it in person. We'll get you onto the call if you're feeling confident and presentable enough for video. So let's get stuck in. Just as a side note, Pete and Julie are both speaking at the conference, the Content Marketing Academy 2016, on the 2nd and 3rd of June. And I'll make sure there's a link to that in the comments section. And this is a great opportunity for anyone that's either thinking about attending the conference or is attending the conference to find out a little bit more about Pete and Julie prior to the conference. And it's just a good opportunity to get an insight into what's actually happening in your business and with regards to obviously content marketing, which is what we're all about here. So without further ado, I think we'll start with Pete. Why don't you take a couple of minutes just to give us, the audience, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, a little bit of insight into how your journey, how it's all come together for you and how podcasting is working with your business at the moment.
Cool. I should set a timer. First of all, apologies for the sort of static caravan motif going on behind me. We've just moved into this house and I'm in a garage conversion bedroom. And it's a really weird place to be, but it's the only quiet place in the house. Okay, so that's why it's a little bit strange. I don't normally do this in my bedroom. But anyway, here we are. So my name is Pete Matthew. I am a chartered financial planner and certified financial planner, which basically means I help people organize their finances in an efficient way to help them achieve their life goals, really. Money is a tool for using. It's not something for wasting. It's for spending and enjoying and for putting away for the future so that you can still spend and enjoy it in 20, 30, 40 years' time. So that's my day job. But I love sharing knowledge in such a way that people can use it. And so nearly 6 years ago, I began a website called Meaningful Money, which was just my attempt to get easy to understand and actionable information about personal finance out to ordinary people who might not necessarily even think of walking through the doors of a professional advisor because they're scared or maybe they don't ever think that they would have use for an advisor. But everybody needs to understand more about money, right? So I began Meaningful Money, spent the first 2.5 years doing video, did nearly 300 videos. And then because I started listening to more and more podcasts, I became sort of entranced by the medium and I just thought I'd have a go. So I put my first podcast episode up in November 2012, went weekly from May 2013. I think that's right. And last year I won UK Podcast of the Year at the inaugural New Media Europe Awards. So it's become a very big part of my life. And obviously we're here to talk about how it's impacted my business as well, because that's what it's all about. Otherwise I'm just having fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great, very fast intro there, Pete. Excellent. I think there's...
Feel free to tell me to slow down if I talk
No, it's good. It's good. There's a lot. I know that we're trying to cover a lot in a very short space of time. So it is about trying to pick out the main things. And we do want to talk about podcasting. And it's good. The other thing that I just want to get across is, or just to emphasize, is that you're in a regulated industry and you're doing things that perhaps other people are quite scared to do, or it seems a bit risky. And I think it's just worth getting that in there, because that's one of the big things that usually comes up when we're chatting to people about content marketing, is that they want to make sure they're playing by the rules. they don't want to get caught out and all the rest of it. So thanks for that introduction. We're going to come back to you, Pete. We've got lots of questions for you. Julie, I'll give you a couple of minutes on the mic to give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself. Tell us about your business, and just tell us, how you've bridged into podcasting, and just give us that quick journey through.
Okay, cool. I am a professional portrait photographer, and 2 years ago, if you said I would have a podcast, I would have told you that was insane. I went along to the Content Marketing Academy. That was 2 years ago, wasn't it? 2014?
Yeah, 18 months ago. Yeah.
And there was a big afternoon of podcasting. And I remember turning around to my studio manager, Fiona, and I said, oh, this bit's not for me. I'm never going to be into podcasting. So I cannot believe that I'm sitting here talking about podcasting right now. Anyway, I got into content marketing via that, started a blog, became quite obsessed with that side of things, and decided, after hearing Pete Matthew talking, and also Mark Pendleton of Coffee Break French, the podcast, the Coffee Break Spanish, etc. And I decided last New Year that, just on a whim, that I could do that. I could teach photography via a podcast. And I just decided to do it. I just jumped right in and did it. So when it comes to a crossover with my portrait photography business, there isn't much of one, to be honest. It's actually quite separate. It's become quite separate. And now I'm starting to get more into the podcasting and less into the professional photography. So it's kind of taken over my life as well. I'm kind of going all in and trying to educate people in photography via the podcast and via my website, Tea Break Talk.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Julie. Excellent. Yeah, you've kind of set this up quite nicely for me. So while you're on your flow there, Julie, could you just tell us a little bit about how, just going a bit more deeper into how this is separated out your business? I know that you've gone all in on podcasting, but it's not just the podcast, right? It's not just this thing on its own. No. How are you finding congruence as far as like a business model is concerned? How are you actually making this part of a business model with a revenue stream? How have you, how has it changed you from going out and taking pictures of people to make money to like this completely different business model, all because of this podcast? Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's quite exciting.
Okay. Well, my background is as a teacher. So I was a teacher up until 2010 when I decided on a career change. So I suppose that's my first love, is education. And what I want to do more than anything is to help people ignite their passion for photography, develop that passion, grow that passion. And doing that via a podcast means I can help more people. So I've been doing workshops in person for 3 years now and helping 12 people at a time. And I want to help more people at once. So as far as revenue, I'm also devising courses at the same time. So I have audio courses and online courses where I can teach beginners how to get from auto mode to manual mode. I have a masterclass, a manual exposure masterclass. So really have I disappeared?
No.
So really my podcast is all free. All the information there is absolutely free. Everything they get is 100% of me. But I hope that in listening to the podcast and developing or growing an audience who trust me, that they will become customers and will invest in courses.
Yes, exactly. So what's interesting though is why would someone listen to a photography podcast, right?
Yeah,
so
I know.
Naturally, I think to myself, photography is all about the workshop, right? Where you've got people and you've got the camera and you've got all the little buttons and all that kind of stuff, very rudimentary, obviously. But you're talking about doing a photography teaching photography podcast, which to me sounds a bit sort of like, well, what doesn't sound right, yeah?
I know there are a lot of photography podcasts out there, and most of them are chat based. So it's chat around the photography industry, you know, maybe talking about new cameras that are coming out, things like that. Mine is very much teaching photography. So all the stuff I do in the podcast is stuff that you can consume whilst you're doing something else. So you can actually be driving to work and learning all about what aperture means. And you can be going to the gym and you can be learning about what shutter speed means. The practical stuff, that is saved for my courses. So I save all that practical stuff for the courses. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean I don't give as much as I possibly can on the podcast for free. But if someone wants to delve deeper and get that real practical experience, then they can go and look at the courses.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've got you. Yeah, definitely. And as your background as a teacher, Julie, do you think that's had any positive impact into your kind of approach and philosophy when it comes to content marketing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Huge. Absolutely huge. I think when you're teaching, you have to you teach the same way, whether it's a child or an adult. You start with the simplest breakdown, and you try to identify with people. You try to build blocks. You know, you don't want to go too fast. All these things are really important, I think, when you've got an education podcast as well.
Okay.
So yeah, even though I taught children, I think it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Principles are the same.
And you know, one thing that kind of flags up with me as well when I talk about content marketing and teaching and the philosophy, and Pete's like 100% behind this whole philosophy as well, where you're giving a lot away, giving a huge amount of value, is that when we talk about a teacher, a good teacher, it's all about trust, right? You trust your primary school teacher. Yeah. And I think this all comes into this whole content marketing piece. So when we talk about content marketing, we're talking about something just much bigger than those two words put together, really. I think it's a great insight into how your business is changing for you, Julie. I think it's really exciting to see the transition between a traditional photography business model and you're transcending into this online global business model through using technically just using free mediums like podcasting, blogging, and obviously just delivering a huge amount of value to your audience, which I think is really cool, which is awesome. We'll come back to you, Julie. Pete.
Okay.
I know a little bit. I know a lot of your story. We've known each other for a while now, and I think it would be really good for the audience to hear from you a little bit about, again, it's kind of the same sort of journey as how your business has changed from being this sort of traditional wealth management, independent financial advisor type of role, and how you've used this sort of like global platform, how it's benefited your business. Can you talk to us a little bit about how podcasting and content marketing in general has shifted the way that you do things from a traditional sort of like normal, you know, way of business to a different way of business, and how that's come about?
Yeah, it's a really good question and a big question.
I know, yeah.
Tell me if I break up a little bit, because you guys have just broken up a little bit on it, and I think that might be my end, which is weird because I'm on a really fast internet pipe here. But anyway, yeah, you mentioned trust, and you mentioned teaching and how we trust people who teach us. I think for us as financial advisors, in my world, we underestimate just what a leap it is for somebody to walk into our office and get all their financial stuff out, because they don't even talk to their kids about that stuff. You know, they don't talk to their family. They don't talk to their closest friends about how much debt they've got, how much money they've been left by their great aunt. You know, this is properly confidential, personal stuff. And there's also an element of fear because they don't want to be made to look stupid, because most of us aren't great naturally with our finances. So that element of trust is a big thing to overcome. And that's definitely a key part of what's happened for me. Chris, I know you've heard me say this before, but the first ever real client that I got who contacted me as a result of Meaningful Money. And by then, actually, at that time, I wasn't podcasting. It was just videos. This guy sent me an email out of the blue and said, a great long email, because it told me their entire financial situation on email. And in it, he just said, having watched several of your videos, we feel like we know you and we feel like we can trust you. Will you work with us? And I just went, yeah, absolutely I will, because what a thing to say in an email. This guy has no idea whether he can really trust me or not. He's never met me, never spoken to me in person, and yet he's seen enough of me and heard enough of my voice to trust me, which is just, I mean, that was a real sort of light bulb moment for me. Now, podcasting, I think, takes that even further, because video by nature is quite a sort of short medium these days. It's not many people will listen to it, will watch an hour-long video about tax, right? I'm not sure I would. No. And yet a podcast, because as Julie was saying, it's a kind of a passive medium. You can consume it as you're on the go. I can go into detail about stuff. So for me, to sort of come back to your question really, Chris, my financial planning practice is 40 years established. I'm the third generation of owners. It's not a family business. I bought into it 10 years ago. So I'm the third generation. So it's a very well-established business. I'd have to work pretty hard to break it, right? I began Meaningful Money as a hobby. And then suddenly this would-be client approached me. And I thought, maybe there's something in this. And maybe what I'm actually doing here is marketing, a word I have no sort of qualifications in. I don't really know anything about officially. And yet in 2014, it became, and podcasting and Meaningful Money became the biggest source of new client inquiries. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but for a professional services firm, we get almost all our new client inquiries from referrals. Trust, again. See, somebody they trust has referred them to us. But for the first time in 2014, it became the biggest source. Podcasting, for goodness sake, became the biggest source of new client inquiries. So now I've got clients all around the country, because I live in the very bottom left of England, in the far southwest, in Penzance. So, you know, it's broadened my reach. I've reached clients that I never would have got otherwise. One that particularly sticks out is a major DJ whose entire life is about pumping stuff in people's ears. You know, he's a proper Ministry of Sound, 2 Ministry of Sound albums. And he found me because he does audio, right? And you know, I never would have got that guy. So it's transformed the shape of my business, the type of clients that I'm dealing with geographically, and the issues that I have to deal with. So it's it's really changed things, but in a really exciting way.
Yeah, it's hugely exciting, Pete. And I think when you talk about it, it gets me excited about it as well. And I kind of reflect on an idiotic move that I made last year where I stopped recording a podcast for like 4 or 5 months. And I knew in my mind, and I've seen it, and the evidence is there, that it actually works as a platform. But it takes... Why? Okay, so this brings me on to my next question, which is, why do people not do it, do you think? Why are more people not doing this? Because I know, Pete, you've talked about this before, where, you know, you look at your industry and there's not a huge amount of competition in the podcasting space. So what is it that is sort of stopping people? Why are more people not doing this?
The biggest objection I get when I talk about it is that I couldn't possibly ever find the time to do what you do, Pete. Mm-hmm. You know, as if I'm basically kicking my heels looking for stuff to do. So I know I'll just try podcasting, you know. Time is the biggest excuse I get all the time. And it's the one that gets me most cross, because I literally had somebody once recently tell me after a presentation I made, I just don't have time, Pete. And yet in the same...
It broke off. Oh, right. We'll get back to him in a second. Is he going to come back? No, right. Okay. I'll let him come back. He'll come out and come back in, hopefully. And we can get up to that story just at a crucial moment of finding out exactly what happened there.
It's a good freeze frame, though. I like that freeze frame.
Meeting the break.
Okay, so
time.
Yeah, I think I think you have an exact opposite challenge in your industry, where Julie, where you're highly competitive in the podcasting space, right? So I think, cool. You know what, Pete? We need the cliffhanger. Let's have the story again. And we're You're talking about you're just like in the break, and then it cut out.
Oh yeah. Well, this guy then said, I couldn't possibly find time to do what you do. And then in the break, I heard him talking about golf. Right. It's like, okay, I don't have any issue with you choosing to do golf, but that is a choice. So it's not a case of I couldn't possibly find the time to do what you do, Pete. It's I choose not to. In which case, that's fine. Free country, that's absolutely the right decision for him. That's fine. But I choose to do this because of the benefits that I get from it. And I reckon I'll probably win in the long term. So time is the biggest objection. The other one is perceived complexity. But perhaps Julie can talk about that. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a good. I think time is definitely a big factor. Complexity, technical stuff, maybe. Julie has kind of the opposite challenge, I think, that you do, Pete. Whereas Julie's industry is quite competitive. So when you look at the podcasting on iTunes, the photography sort of space in iTunes when it comes to podcasting, there's a lot of stuff going on there, right, Julie?
Yeah. Oh, loads. Yeah.
So how do you?
Not quite as many in my arena. I'm kind of pitching my podcast to beginners and intermediates, whereas a lot of the other photography podcasts are aimed at people who are fully entrenched in photography. It's very techy. Right. It's all chat about the photography world, whereas mine is very much for beginners and intermediates who want to learn.
Okay.
So it's still a huge market, but I think that's also a benefit. I have a huge market, so there's room for me.
Yeah,
that's how I look at it.
So how did you use your, you went from the traditional model to this sort of building this online model, Julie? How did you feel at that very point when I know that you felt a little bit nervous about publishing your podcast.
A little bit nervous.
You might want to tell us a little bit about that story. And, how did it feel to realize or understand the importance for you of building an audience with your podcast?
I realized the importance really early on. I was just absolutely terrified to do it. Terrified. And I don't say that lightly. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. And I had podcasts ready to go, recorded, on iTunes, ready to go. And I refused to market them. I refused to let anyone know about them because I was so scared. So that went on for quite a while, actually. And Andy Brown, I think he's on at the moment, isn't he?
Yeah, Andy Brown's there, yeah.
Andy Brown said this thing to me. We were all together at a content marketing meetup. And I was telling everyone, look, it's all there. I've got all these podcasts and I just don't know what to do. I'm so scared to push that button and let people know about it. I mean, who do I think I am, kind of thing. And Andy said to me, he said, Julie, are you competitive? And I said, well, I'd say I'm quite competitive. And he said, well, how would you feel if tomorrow someone came out with a podcast just like yours and started marketing it and beat you to it? And I went home that night and I pushed that button and let everyone know, because actually I thought, well, I'm not going to put all this work in and then not let anyone know about it. It's crazy, but it's a scary, scary thing. It was a scary thing for me. I don't know if it's scary for everyone, but it was way out of my comfort zone. But I suppose that's where life begins.
Sorry, Pete.
I'm a tart. I just like...
You love it.
I like putting myself out on the internet. Closed, obviously.
Behind the microphone as well. So, Julie, what was the fear wrapped up in? Can you give us a little bit of insight into maybe just what was going on there?
No one's going to listen to it, or the people who do listen to it will think it's crap, or other photographers will jump on me and say, what are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. Your photos are crap. Just all this stuff that I'm really getting over, which is good.
Cool. Good stuff.
But that was it. Just silly stuff. Just do it is so true. Just do it. Yeah. It just has to happen.
Definitely. Another objection I get is, it's all kind of been said. Pete, you've done 144 episodes. What on earth am I possibly going to add? Which is another understandable but ridiculous objection, because even if somebody took every word that I had said and re-said it, it would be different because it would be them and not me. So, it's just one of those things that people need to get over and just do it. Absolutely right.
I think when it comes to when we're talking about building an audience, I mean, the title of this is to become an authority in your industry, which we're going to kind of get into and talk about. I think we've kind of emphasized or implied it all anyway. It's about building up an audience, right? And you're not going to have everybody has got the opportunity to build their own audience, right? So there's, like, for example, there's hundreds of marketing podcasts. There's lots of photography podcasts, and there's lots of podcasts and information and content around money, right? This is about you building your audience, right? So, and I think that's an important point to make, is that there's an opportunity, a niche there for everybody, because we attract lots of different people, right? You know, some people like what we're doing, some people won't like what we're doing. Some people like the fact that I'm Scottish, some people would rather listen to an American. So it's like there's lots of different things there, but I think there's just to kind of bring that sort of subject to a close, which is that there is an opportunity there for everyone to build their own audience through podcasting.
Yeah.
What does it? I think it'd be nice to talk a little bit about authority. The title of the podcast is a bit of marketing, I guess, in its own right. But how can a podcast, having a podcast, build authority? What is that? What's that about? What does that mean for you? Does that resonate with you, Pete or Julie? Is that something you're working towards, or is it something that you feel is important?
After you, Julie.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's way up there on the priority list. The people I want to reach, I want them to, well, it comes down to trust, doesn't it? I want them to trust me. I want them to trust that I'm giving them the right information and the best information out there. It's so important to me. Absolutely.
Definitely. I think by creating content of all kinds, podcast obviously as well,
He's gone.
He's going to be so gutted about his internet connection. Poor lad. I've been here before. Every Blab I've been on, there has been a technical issue with me usually. Julie, just to kind of talk about authority, what
you want to become.
What signals are you seeing of having authority or thought leadership? What kind of signals are we looking at? I mean, how do you know you're kind of ticking that box? Sorry.
Okay. I suppose something quite profound actually is I put my first course up for sale in December. And so out of the people who bought it, 80% of them were podcast listeners. They listened to my podcast. So that was huge for me, because I realized that these people, I tried to sell it to lots and lots of people who didn't listen to my podcast, but the ones who purchased it were mainly podcast listeners because they trusted me. So they did see me as an authority, and they saw me as a trustworthy person in that industry. So that was huge. That was a huge discovery, and that has led me to really ramp up with how many podcasts I'm recording. I'm now recording 3 a week, whereas it was 1 a week, maybe 1 a month sometimes. So now it's all about the podcast. I realize how completely crucial it is to building my business.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I wanted to get out of you, or was going to ask a question around anyway, was what signals you're seeing what signals you are seeing from your efforts, and why you're now taking it from maybe 1 podcast every other week to 3 a week, and why that's important. I mean, I take it it's going to be more sales for your course, but obviously building that trust and that authority with people.
Yeah. Well, my goal this year is to help as many learner photographers as I possibly can. Now, if I started blogging more, the competition in my arena is fierce. I mean, I wouldn't get a look in for a very long time. But with the podcast, it's so much easier to reach an audience, a bigger audience, than it would be for me to broadcast on YouTube or to blog regularly, because I'd be fighting with a million others. Whereas in the podcast space, I'm getting in there a bit easier. But also, I think people hearing your voice and regularly downloading that podcast and listening to you, in the gym, on the way to work, walking the dog, making their dinner, they really feel like they know you. They absolutely feel like they know you. And for me, it was a quick way in, little bit less competition, but also I'm comfortable in that space as well. I'm more comfortable there than I am on video like right now.
Now, your podcast is excellent, Julie. I remember the first time I listened to it and I thought, this is awesome. It's really, really good. When I first listened to it, and I know you were doubting yourself and everything, but as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is going to be good.
Oh, thank you. I think Andy Brown listens to it to go to sleep. So
your voice is very much sort of like it's creamy when you're talking.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, that's
no business is that about me.
And Call Gray that's online right now, I'll probably pull me up for my very descriptive words about things, but creamy is the word. Anyway, Pete, we were talking about authority. We're going to bring this sort of like this topic to head, I think, but I want you to kind of bring in some insights from you. The question I asked Julie while you were away tinkering around with your web there was, what signals do you see through your podcast and through your content marketing efforts that kind of give you, like Julie obviously has seen those signals, given her more confidence, but signals of authority that show you that you're doing something right? What's kind of happening there with your audience? What kind of things are you seeing that are kind of feel like you're establishing yourself? I mean, 144 podcasts, 300 videos. Okay, that is going to change the game. But what signals are you finding that are happening with your audience?
Okay, I get more feedback from podcasts than from any other medium. So, I spent 2.5 years doing nearly 300 videos, and got occasional feedback, occasional comments. With the podcast, most days I'll get an email. Sometimes it's just thank you. A big fan of the show. They'll maybe ask a quick question. The ones I enjoy most, and the ones which I think make me feel like I'm making a difference and hence become an authority, are the ones where people have said, because of what you have taught on your podcast, we have done this. And as a result, we are now in this position. And They say things like, if you hadn't got me to make a change with my budgeting or, whatever, I know that my future would have been different. So my future is now better because of you, Pete. And every time I think, fantastic, that's what it's about. So becoming an authority, I think, is making enough of a difference in people's lives so that they'll never go anywhere else. And they will tell everybody they know that you want to know about finance or you want to know about photography, this is where you need to go. Forget everything else. This is the sort of best source of information. And it's not just information, it's information I can use. And that's what matters, right? Okay. So that feedback I get all the time. Download numbers don't float my boat. I get sometimes a little uptight about it, but I don't get excited about that. I get a good number of new clients that come to me and ask me to work with them one-on-one. But I'm only one guy, so I haven't got a whole load of capacity like that. I'm never going to change the world one-on-one. That's why I began the podcast, because I wanted to scale what I do. I know the difference I can make in people's lives financially one-on-one, but I wanted to scale that. And that's what podcasting, I think, arguably better than any other medium right now, but certainly for me, has meant, I'm reaching 5,000 people a week. And if you put those people in a theater, then, Julie, you talk about being nervous. I'd be nervous talking to 5,000 people, and yet that's how many people are tuning in. So, I just think that's staggering.
It's
it's nuts. And
they don't have to make time. They don't have to make time to sit down and read you have to actually sit down and read a blog. Mm-hmm. You have to sit down and watch a video, but they don't have to make time for a podcast. They can consume it whilst they're just going about their day-to-day life. And that for me is a big factor.
Yeah.
Sure.
The 5,000 a week thing is just like, that puts it into kind of perspective a little bit, because we've got to kind of come back to your introduction a little bit, Pete, which is your part of a small business in Penzance, in the sort of like the nooks and crannies of the UK, in the middle of nowhere, basically.
Nicely put.
Yeah, and you're reaching a global audience, and you're getting your podcasts are getting downloaded 5,000 times a week. I think it's amazing. Now, we talk about this whole thing about authority and achieving authority, and I think you and Julie both sort of emphasised this as well, that is a outcome, right, of this whole thing. That's a result. It's not the why you do it, though, is it? I mean, why do you give all your information away for free? Why are you doing it? Because that's another reason why people don't do this. They'll say, well, why would I want to just share everything I know with everyone, and then they can go away and just do it themselves? Who wants to take the lead on that one?
Oh, for me, it's just trust. It's simply trust. I want to give them as much as I possibly can, so that if they choose to go any further, it's me they'll choose to go further with. But also, like Pete said earlier, that I am the one they will recommend. If they never buy from me, that's absolutely fine, and most of them won't, but they will recommend me to others, because I'm not holding back on anything. And I really don't. I hold back on absolutely nothing. The only thing I don't give in my podcast is the stuff that I can't, physically can't do it, because you need the practical. So I think that people appreciate that. The listeners appreciate that. In fact, I get messages all the time saying, I can't believe you're giving so much. What's the catch? Is there a catch here? Which there isn't. It's great. You just want to help.
It's true. And it's for me, in my world, I spend a lot of time, people come to me a lot and say, how can I get more? Obviously, given that I'm dealing with finance, how can I become richer? How can I increase my wealth? But it's, to my mind, a universal principle that the more you give, the more you receive. Take that however way you want it. That might be different from a Christian perspective, through a sort of an atheist, universalist perspective, but I reckon if you give, the universe looks after you, right? And so you asked Chris what my why was. I don't do this and never did this to get new clients. That I just never even thought that was possible in 2010 when I first sort of propped up a video camera on the promenade down in Penzance. I just thought I'd have a go and have a bit of fun. And Gary Vee was doing it, so I thought I would do it. But now I have developed a platform which the possibilities are endless. And this is what I can see myself doing still when I'm 80. Whereas, I go to the office sometimes and the nitty gritty of actually, compliance and all that sort of stuff that I have to deal with. Sometimes I think, actually, I could stop doing this tomorrow. But I come alive when I'm behind the microphone. I absolutely love it. And so a lot of it's for me. There's a definite element of selfishness in that I love doing it. But then you get the emails and the comments and you understand that people's lives are changing. Probably people that I will never work with and never earn a penny from. That's something we might want to address in a minute. There are lots of people out there I'll never earn a penny from. But the universe will look after me enough to make sure that I'll be fine.
Touched on a lot of really key points there. One is doing it for yourself. I think you've got to do it for yourself. If you're not, I think that's the purpose behind what you're doing, is to, you're helping others, but there's got to be something in it for you too. Have fun. I think content marketing really does bring the fun back into marketing, because as you've both said, it's this whole element of giving, helping someone to have a better life, or impacting other people. Like Pete, what you just said about the examples you gave, where you're changing people's lives. You're putting them in a better position, and it's making real difference to people if they decide to act upon the things that you're obviously sharing with them. So I think podcasting is a fantastic platform or medium to use, but obviously you can do it wrong. You can do it in the wrong ways, which is to sell all the time, or to, and it's all about giving value. And for people that are on the call today live, we've got some questions. I think we'll go into Q&A in maybe like 5 or 10 minutes time before we finish up. But we need to know, what does it truly take to make this happen? Because I know how difficult it is to do this not just consistency, because that's fine. It's the constancy of it, is doing it when you don't want to do it, or when you've got other stuff to deal with. When you're having a bad day, you still have to get it done. So how do you, Pete, I think is worth sort of letting you sort of riff on this a little bit. Is first is just 300 videos, 144 podcasts. What is it? How does someone achieve that? You know, if it's a
okay, if the motivation is there, you'll do it, right? And so the feedback that I get constantly is a constant motivation. So, you know, I don't lack motivation. The rest is careful time planning, batching sometimes. But, you know, those are things which can be learned. Not everybody is a naturally organized person. I tend to have a natural bent towards being able to organize my time, which is probably why I have very little patience with people who say they haven't got time to do what I do. It's just like, yes, you have. You just need to sort your life out. But, you know, everybody's different and I mustn't be judgmental. I'm really trying with that. But, you know, careful planning, routine. You know, Chris, you got a new baby. Babies thrive on routine, and I'm pretty sure that adults do too. So if life is chaotic, you're going to struggle to fit this stuff in. But for me, it's about batching. So I have a set time when I write. I have a set time when I record. You know, these things generally don't move. I try to be a little bit ahead, maybe a week or two ahead, so that if something does come up, I don't know, fall off my bike or whatever, you know, do something where I suddenly can't get to it, then to be honest, actually, even if that happens, the world won't end. But just careful planning, bit of thought process, and thinking ahead. So I know a month ahead what my content's going to be. So yeah, but you know, Julie, you're doing 3 a week, which is amazing. My goal this week is to do 1 blog, 1 podcast, and 1 video a week, and just sort of broaden it out. That's just something I'm trying to do this year. Yeah,
and that's a good one. And I think what we'll do is, I think we should talk about that. I think you're going to join us on another call in a few weeks' time, aren't you, Pete?
Yeah.
Sometime in the future. We'll talk a bit more about like the wider search and really getting your content out wider in another call. Julie, what do you think the sort of key to success is, making this stuff happen day to day? Is it an illusion or?
I bow down to Pete here because I am so not organized. I have no routine. I'm a nightmare. But what I can say is that I've had to do that. I'm changing dramatically. So I read this book end of last year, The One Thing, which has totally changed my life. And basically how I get through all these podcasts is I prioritize it. It's the first thing I do. And I do not move from my office until it's done. And I don't even switch tasks. Like I don't check Facebook. I don't have my phone in the room. I do nothing except that podcast, and I don't leave until it's done. And it's harsh sometimes, but it's the only way I can do it. That sounds like I'm really disciplined, and I'm not. You are. But I know I have to be now to do this. I have to be, and it's such a high priority for me. It's the highest priority I have. Mm-hmm. I mean, in a work sense.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So it's the first thing I do. It comes before everything. I don't check emails. Nothing.
Okay, good. Now, there's something in all of this, and it's fine for you, us 3 talking here about the value of content marketing, right? Because we've all seen something from it. We've sold something, we've had a lead, we've seen the true value of content marketing. And that's probably a big reason why we prioritize it, right? We make it the thing that we have. Look, this is a piece of content marketing right now. It's 9:15 at night. We don't have to be doing this. We just don't. We could be doing something else entirely. But we know that an interview, a podcast, a blog, we know that it builds. It's the compound effect of all of that stuff that helps us to build our business, which obviously helps us to build the life that we're trying to lead, you know, and create for ourselves. So for anyone that's not seen the value of content marketing firsthand, that's where I think there's a challenge in getting someone to prioritize it as an activity in their life. Don't know what the answer is to that or the conclusion, but that's my observation.
Yeah, you're right. The second biggest question I always ask is, what's the ROI? Gary Vaynerchuk talks about it all the time, you know, and he said, well, what's the ROI of your mother? You know, and what's the ROI of a telephone? Well, it's how you you use it. It's impossible to put a quantifiable value on everything you got from your parents or your upbringing. It's impossible to put a quantifiable value on the phone. It's about how you use it. And this is just one, but we've never lived in a time like this. I'm looking at the map here now, and there's at least 3 or 4 people in the US and one in South America.
South America, yeah.
It's just staggering.
You're right. And you mentioned this earlier, the opportunity, the actual, the playing field is leveled for everybody, I think. And the opportunity is there for anybody, like literally anyone that wants to take it. Yeah. And I guess we're just in that you talk about this all the time, Pete. You mention it a lot through the conversations we have, and it is this very exciting time that we live in. And podcasting, whatever, blogs, videos, whatever it is, giving value, providing value, teaching, and getting your voice, your brand out there, and trying to connect with people. We've just got this huge opportunity to do that. I mean, we've got people listening from all over the world to this show, which is amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I can give you. You guys want to mention anything else you feel that's relevant to this conversation? I'm going to go into Q&A in just a second.
Okay. Just one thing, because Julie, you mentioned obviously you got products specifically that you're selling, courses, which which is fantastic. It's something I've dipped my toe into, not with massive success, but I'm going to be doing more of this year. So that's, for me, in a regulated industry, that's more difficult, I would argue. So I have made money and gained clients who would not have come to me except through the podcast. I wasn't scratching around for clients before, but I've definitely gained clients that I wouldn't otherwise have had. But with a bit of careful thought and a bit of care jumping around the compliance rules, I can also expand my practice in ways that I couldn't do otherwise, like courses, which are not regulated and not, quite so restricted and things like that. So there's all kinds of possibilities for making money off this as well, no matter what your niche.
Yeah. Do you have sponsorship, Pete?
I do, yeah. Good point. Yeah, I do have sponsorship. It's a slightly unusual arrangement in that it's a company that I have a good business relationship with anyway, but because they are also a supplier, they're an investment management firm called 7IM, and because they're a supplier, so we use them to manage a lot of our clients' money. I obviously have to fully disclose that right at outset with any new prospect that comes to me. I go through a sheet with them and say, look, this is a pre-existing relationship. I might end up recommending that company to you. You need to know that I would do that anyway. It's not just because they pay me to put their name on the podcast. Slightly sticky area that, but it's not something I've got into trouble for yet. It's worth saying, actually, the business relationship predated the podcast sponsorship by many years. So yeah,
it's an interesting point, and I'm sort of pulling out something there, which is the you're building, Julie. I think what you're doing is fantastic. You're all in on it, which is amazing. It's obviously a huge risk for you as well, and it's an exciting time. But I think that it's so exciting to know the potential for building monthly recurring revenue, working once, being paid forever for a piece of work that you've done. And I think that is something that, to be honest with you, a lot of people don't think about, but is really what's up. That's amazing. That's like the best business model to have, is the one that you can sell to anyone. You build it once and you sell it, and you're building your marketing around that. So one of the questions we've got is, where do you market your podcasts? And you could probably take that wider and say, when I read that question, I think to myself, you do the podcast. That's just the starting line. The content piece is where you start, and then you've still got work to do after that, right? You've got to market your marketing. Right. So how do we do? What are you guys doing to sort of get your podcast out there into people's ears?
For me, you need to go where people are at, right? So people who are looking for audio information about any given subject, there is no question the biggest audio search engine is iTunes. After that, it's Audible, but of course that's audio books. But iTunes is by far and away the biggest podcast library out there, and certainly the best known. Obviously, you've got Spreaker is one. You've got Stitcher, Deezer. There are others around, but there's nobody to touch iTunes. So by far the biggest aspect for me has been gaming iTunes as far as I can. There are things you can do. I noticed a significant uptick. For example, I realized about a year after beginning the Meaningful Money podcast that nowhere in my description or anything did I have the words personal finance, which is probably a key term. So I put that in and noticed a fairly significant uptick because suddenly people were finding me in search. And so, by asking for reviews, reading out reviews in the show so that people like to hear their name. I get emails saying, woohoo, you mentioned me and stuff, which I just find remarkable. But then people leave reviews because they want to hear their names out, and that puts you up to the top in iTunes. Okay. So my marketing efforts, such as they are, apart from the obvious ones, Twitter and Facebook, LinkedIn, everything goes on there when a new podcast episode is launched. For me, it was getting the iTunes listing right.
Yeah, there's a couple other things, Pete, as well I'll pick up because I know your story and I know what you get up to, but you've got good design element, I think, in your images when you're doing your podcast. Everyone's got a custom image, right? I think that matters a lot, especially when it comes to social, because all you see is the title and the image. Yes. That's a big factor, I think. Consistency, obviously, every week. And you've built up an audience already as well. So when you put out a podcast, that immediately gets downloaded onto... That doesn't happen overnight. That's something you have to earn. I think that's one of the key words when it comes to content marketing is earning that audience, that build.
And I was there is not many. I don't have a lot of competition in the UK. I would never say it was competition, but I know of one other podcast done by a superb financial planner. He's on the call, actually, a guy called Martin Bamford, who I got a lot of respect for and have done. He has an excellent weekly podcast as well. But other than that, it's me and him. So, I know Julie's in a very different position.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, it's quite good to know that the podcast in itself is a piece of marketing that you can market to build your audience, right? So there's that. And thanks for all your insights there, Pete. And I think that iTunes definitely is a factor when it comes to it is the biggest search engine there, I think, for podcasts. Julie, what are you kind of getting up to? Just answer this question. Where do you market your podcasts?
Okay. So same as Pete, I try to get as many iTunes reviews as possible. That needs to become a priority again. I kind of ask for them and then fall back on them a little bit. But I do notice that when you do get a little influx of reviews that you do climb in iTunes. So being visible in iTunes is a big deal. My downloads go way up when I appear in that first couple of lines. So when I say that, I mean in the what's hot section of visual arts for me. But also on top of that, I have a Facebook community as well. So I have a Facebook group that I am heavily involved with. There's, I think there's about 700 or 800 people in there now, and they're my marketeers. They're amazing. They're like my brand ambassadors. So I always share my podcast there. And often they will tell people about it and welcome people into the group to hear all about it. But also I share it to social media with branded images. I send out a MailChimp with new podcast episodes on it. And I also turn every podcast into a blog as well with images and full-on blog post.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is when you say that, yeah. I think a couple of things I just want to pull out on that is that I think the biggest lesson here is where do you market your podcast? The question is a good question because it kind of emphasizes the fact that the podcast has to be created and you've still got a bit of work to do to channel that out there. A couple of big things though, I think Julie, it's good that you mentioned that actually because it completely slipped my mind, is having a community that's very close to you already and building up that somewhere you can drop that podcast in and it kind of, it goes into your audience really quickly. Community on Facebook, email is still important, I think, as well, to get it into people's inboxes. I think is important. And it's that consistent effort with the marketing that's going to build the audience, definitely. And the branding, getting onto your website, of course, is a big part of this as well. Yeah, each of you put the podcast onto your website too. So do we, and I think that helps. Brilliant. I think we've covered some of the main things. Hopefully that answers your question, Sandra. Thanks for your question. Appreciate it. Let's skip down. So we've got like 3 or 4 questions here. I'm not sure what I'm doing, actually. Let me see.
Just give me 2 seconds, Chris. I've committed the ultimate fail and not plugged my computer in. Just give me 2 seconds.
Okay. Okay.
Epic fail. Don't know what I'm on tonight.
Sorry. We'll answer some more of these questions. Is it better? This is from Col Gray. Thanks, Col, for your question. Is it better to just get a podcast out there of okay quality? This is definitely a Col question. Or should you really try and have it done professionally from the start?
Oh, get it out there. Just get it out there. I mean, I don't think I wouldn't want to listen to a podcast that sounded terrible. You know, I would turn that off very quickly. But I know Col, so I know what he's talking about. He means, does it have to be perfect?
Yeah.
And no, it definitely doesn't have to be perfect at all.
No.
I think someone said at the first Content Marketing Academy, I think it was the other Colin Gray, who said, don't worry about your first few podcasts because no one listens to them. So that really stuck in my head. That helped me through my first few. I don't think they have to be perfect. I think they have to be listenable, though,
that's right.
Because you can't attack people's ears with static and echoes and stuff. Maybe they just won't want to listen. No matter how good the content is, they won't want to listen to it. So it has to be decent.
Yeah.
Dead right. You can't hide. You know, if you're in somebody's ears, it's amazing what they do pick up. And if it becomes even remotely uncomfortable, they won't listen. You're dead right there, Julie. It doesn't have to be perfect, although I think striving for better is no bad thing. But I mean, Chris, the quality of your stuff amazes me, given you're on a Sennheiser headset. What do you pay for that?
£30.
My podcasting setup is at least £1,000. That really that makes me cry. But sponsorship.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I mean, I love technology, so I've enjoyed putting that together, and I think it sounds like it, but I don't think it sounds £970 better than yours.
Yeah. I think if I was to sort of weigh in on this, when I first started my podcast, I was like, I'm not going to I'm typically and have been bad over the period of my career since I was in my late teens to buy all the gear before I had any idea. So I would typically go and spend $1,000 on equipment and then go do it. But I said to myself this time around, I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this first with the stuff I've got, do what I can with what I've got where I am, basically, and just try to do the best I can with what I have. And I did it. And it was with, I think my first couple of shows were like iPhone headphones into a phonic. And we didn't even use a computer. And after that, I just bought this, and that's been fine ever since. I do want to upgrade it eventually, but at the moment, it's good enough, I think.
Certainly is.
Yeah. Thanks for your question.
It's amazing what you can do, with an iPhone and a decent microphone. It doesn't need to be much.
Exactly. You're right. Let's have a look at this question. I thought I'm doing the right thing here. Yeah. What podcasting platforms do you guys use or recommend? I've used Podbean in the past, which made things simple. Okay. My podcast RSS feed, because that's essentially what a podcast is. It's just an RSS feed of new episodes. Is produced using a plugin for my WordPress site called PowerPress. So it's a free plugin, although I support it via Patreon because it's brilliant, and it creates a very rich RSS feed, which then you submit to iTunes and the rest. My audio files are hosted on Libsyn, which I'd pay $20 a month for sort of limited, capped upload, but unlimited download. But I mean, I tried to add it up, what the sort of bandwidth would be, and it's now hundreds of gigabytes a week being downloaded because of, the sort of numbers, which is nice. But I wouldn't want that on my WordPress installation. No. So using Libsyn, they cope with all the bandwidth. So, it's next to nothing really. So Libsyn for hosting the audio files, and then PowerPress and Blu-ray. It's not as simple as something as Podbean, which apparently works really well. So that's just what I use. I learned everything that I know from the podcast Answer Man, a guy called Cliff Ravenscraft. And he is a nerd. So I kind of just, that resonated with me. So that's what I do. Perfect. Thanks for that, Pete. Good insights. Julie, do you want to give an insight into how what platforms you're using?
I was so clueless. hired someone to do it all for me. I think if I didn't do that, I would never, ever have pressed that button. So I went with Colin Gray, who is the podcast host. I think it's podcasthost.com, is it?
Yep.
And he set everything up for me. I had nothing to do with it except for talking into a microphone. But since then, I have learned how to do it all myself, and I now do it all myself. So I use PowerPress as well, like Pete does, and I host all my audio on SoundCloud. But without that start with Colin Gray, podcast host, I think I would have been a lot longer getting it all set up. The technology was a real barrier for me.
Yeah, we did mention it earlier, there is a technical element to the whole thing, but once you've got it, you've set it up, I think after that it becomes easier
It's actually, it's so straightforward. I didn't realise how straightforward it actually was. I think it's the thought of it more than anything.
Right.
But it's fine.
Getting easier all the time as well. New services are coming out, and
It must have been a lot harder when you started out, Pete. Was it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I watched 2 tutorials, one from Cliff Ravenscraft and one from Pat Flynn of Smart Passive Income. I'm a nerd. I love technology, so that gives me a kind of an advantage, I suppose. I imagine why it would be terrifying if you weren't sort of naturally wired that way. But yeah, I mean, it feels like it's a bit more bits bolted on rather than a sort of one-stop solution, but it works just fine.
Yeah, I think I use SoundCloud as well. It's really simple for me. I don't want it to be complicated, but I think it's not as complicated as it used to be. But I think it has a legacy. What's the word I'm looking for? People think it's more complicated than it actually is, because I think podcasting used to come across quite nerdy and technical, whereas actually it's much. People are using it for business purposes now, so it has to become easier. Naturally, as it grows and develops, it's going to become easier and easier and easier. And all these, like you said, these tools, these applications are coming out to help us out. We've got one more question here, which is just reference, how often you send out an email with the podcast. Do you guys have a routine with emails, or are you just sending it out as it goes live? Or
no? It depends. I sometimes send a few links to a few at once, maybe once a week. But if I think there's one that deserves special email, all by itself, then I do that. So there's no pattern really. This
is my biggest weakness. I don't send them out at all, and I definitely need to do that.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing sort of 3 bits of content a week. I'm just going to do like a digest at the end of the week, I think, on like a Friday or a Saturday morning or something, and just be interested to see what difference that makes, actually. But it's one thing that I've been meaning to do for ages and just never get in the habit of doing it. So that's something to add to my list.
I think if we
definitely makes a difference. I see a spike
really?
After the email goes out. Yeah, I think it makes a difference.
What day
certainly will for you with your numbers, Pete.
What day do you send it out, Julie?
I don't have a day, just whenever.
Okay.
Whenever I have a moment. I used to do it automatically through an RSS, an RSS-driven campaign via MailChimp. I stopped that. I just felt it was too generic. So now I sit down and I actually write it up to match what the content is and put a little bit more thought into it. So really, it's whenever I get time. If I schedule it, it's often for the weekend. I know that's a bit strange for others, but I find that with my audience, it's the weekend they get time for this. It's not a work thing. It's something they do in their spare time. So often it's a Saturday or a Sunday they're going to sit down and listen. So sometimes the weekend is better for me.
Makes sense. Mansion Twit on the comments saying they send out once a month. It's
yeah,
not a bad idea as well. A monthly summary.
Yeah,
I think that there's an important thing in the whole discussion here, and that is that email marketing is still a massive factor. It's the list building, which Pete, we've talked a lot about, Julie, we've talked a lot about as well separately, is that building your list is still hugely important in this whole thing, is getting your email database built, and then obviously engaging with them and keeping them warm as you chat to them and send them content. And I think it's still hugely important. No matter what marketing you're doing, it seems that email always come back to this thing called a list. Quick one, Julie. Do you know the answer to this one? Who's the leader?
I was just looking at that. There are. I don't actually know how you can tell who's the leader. Maybe Pete will know. I know that the top podcasts in the photography space are Petapixel, and Frono's Photo. So they're the kind of the top ones. But they seem to change. Every time I log in, there's a different person sitting at the top. So I don't know. Is there a way of knowing that? I'm
not sure. I think that it's probably just based on what you know from within your with your exposure to the podcasting space, basically. Yeah. Who's the biggest sort of podcast in your space, Pete?
In this country,
Pete Matthew.
Well, yeah, there isn't hardly anyone near in this country. There's two guys who run something called the Property Podcast, which is specifically for property investing. I mean, they just blew up iTunes when they launched a few weeks before me. They were very kind to mention me early on, and I know a good chunk of my audience came from them. But most of the personal finance podcasts are in the US, in which case Dave Ramsey is a big player in that. So he has a daily radio show, which he podcasts out. And maybe Todd Tressider's got some good stuff. There's a lot in America. A lot of it's garbage, but there's some good stuff.
Yeah, well, that's good. Guys, I think I'm conscious of time. I just want you to let the audience know where they can find out a little bit more about you. You want to give them your Twitter account, your website, your podcast, whatever. Julie, could you let everyone know how they can get in touch with you if they've got any questions about anything, reference this call?
Yeah, sure.
How they can listen to the podcast?
They can listen to my podcast via iTunes or Stitcher. It's the Tea Break Tog Photography Podcast. Tog is short for photographer, just in case anyone didn't know that. I'm at Tea Break Tog on Twitter, and they can get in touch with me via Facebook as well.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Pretty much where you can find me if you search Pete Matthew as opposed to Peter, or make sure you got 2 T's and no S on my surname, then you'll find me. But Meaningful Money is the website, meaningfulmoney.tv. And apologies everybody for my technical hitches this evening. Very annoying.
That's okay. We all have them, unfortunately. They're not quite there with technology in the UK yet. It's quite frustrating. But yeah, thanks very much for both coming onto the call tonight. Obviously, the big reason why the 3 of us are here having a chat is because we've got our Content Marketing Academy conference coming up in June, of which both of you are speaking. Pete is one of our keynote speakers who's going to be delivering an inspirational talk all about content marketing. And Julie's going to be joining us as one of our lightning speakers to talk about something that she's not talked about on this podcast, actually, which is interesting. True. So, yes, exactly. So we're going to be really diving into it in the conference. Just to give you a little bit of an insight into what the conference is all about, it's the philosophy or the big idea behind the whole thing is to really showcase content marketing in action. So every single speaker has got their own successful journey in content marketing, and that's really, really important. It's a conference for business people. It's not a marketing conference for marketers primarily, but we do attract marketers obviously as well. And as business owners and entrepreneurs, we are marketers. We have to be, because that's how we build our business. So the Content Marketing Conference is really all about motivating and inspiring people to take action, but also to leave with insights and to learn from people that have already been successful, like Pete and Julie. So we've got 10 speakers at the moment. We're hoping to add more, actually. We've got people like Mark Schaefer, Anne Handley, Amy Schmitter, Pete and Julie joining us at the conference. So we've got quite a roster of speakers. It's quite exciting. You can find out more about that at 2016.co.uk. Go across there, have a look at what's on offer, and obviously register your tickets. We've got an early bird discount up until the 31st of January where you can save £100. So check that out and come and join us and meet Julie, myself, and Pete in person.
It's going to be great.
Definitely.
It's going to be awesome.
Can't wait.
Yeah, cannot wait. Yeah, me too. It's going to be really exciting, and it's getting me actually having this call. I'm really excited to get these blabs up and running. We've got these every fortnight, every Tuesday at the same time, and it's just really building up the excitement. I think it's going to be awesome. Cool. Thanks very much for joining me, guys, on the call tonight. I really appreciate your time, especially out in the evening, and I hope everybody has got some value from the call today. So thanks a lot, guys. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.